for clues, they'll take on the most controversial evidence in the history of Bigfoot, the Patterson film. But can they come to a final conclusion?
If there were no hoaxes, there we have a Sasquatch.
It is one of the greatest mysteries of our time, the search for a creature known as Bigfoot. Now, 5 of the world's leading experts in natural history have come together to create the definitive guide to Bigfoot. Their goal? To see if there is proof that a creature is still out there. Our team has decided to examine the most controversial piece of evidence in existence. It consists of 953 frames of 16mm footage, known as the Patterson film. About 40 seconds of silent footage that has galvanized the world. It was shot here, Northern California, 6 Rivers National Park, Bluff Creek. Here in the fall of 1967 begins the greatest Bigfoot mystery of them all. As our team watches, primate experts Ian Redmond and Anna Nakaris point to the way the creature walks as a convincing argument for the film's authenticity.
It is very relaxed, very flowing gait, clearly comfortably walking bipedally. There's no question of awkwardness.
Interesting to see how the creature is swinging its arms quite strongly from side to side. That's something almost more than I'd expect to see even from a gibbon.
Team members Bill Sellers and Jack Rink remain skeptical. They focus on the man who shot the film and why.
For me, this clip is really all about trust. If you saw a clip of film like this from an impeccable source that you believed, then you'd have to take it at face value. This is, a hairy creature walking across the screen. If you don't trust the person who's actually taking the pictures, and you don't trust that it's not a hoax, it doesn't really matter how convincing it looks, because we know that Hollywood special effects and things can recreate almost anything, and it's very difficult to tell.
True story.
The man behind the camera In December 2000, these two photographs were sent to the Sarasota Sheriff's Department. They allegedly show a 5 to 6 foot tall skunk ape that broke into someone's garden. Is this creature fact, fiction, or a case of mistaken identity? Florida's tropical swamp is an ideal habitat for an ape. But the scientists are highly skeptical it's Bigfoot.
There's a whole huge menagerie of pets that have been released, particularly in South Florida.
We know that primates can thrive in these habitats, and chimpanzees are extremely adaptable, and there's a lot of food they can be eating in Florida.
Keeping chimps and orangutans as pets became fashionable in the 1970s, just when sightings of the skunk ape took off.
A very common issue is for people to buy a baby or an infant primate, keep it until it's a bit older and stronger, and often they're herd
releases, perhaps, you know, decades ago, and the odd sighting, and that would certainly keep alive a rumor of a skunk ape for a long, long time.
The team believes the huge surge of skunk ape sightings in Florida, more than 200, are a case of mistaken identity triggered by Roger Patterson's film. Sightings of skunk ape are probably nothing more than an escaped chimp. But not all clusters are as easily explained. The biggest hotspot the team cannot dismiss is the Pacific Northwest. A region that stretches from Northern California up through Oregon, Washington State, and well into Canada. This area has an unbroken history of sightings. It is from this region that the word Sasquatch originates, and local Native Americans describe sightings of a tribe of hairy giants that date back centuries. This ancient wisdom may be the key to solving the mystery of Bigfoot. A team of scientists is searching for definitive evidence of Bigfoot. Having examined the famous 1967 film by Roger Patterson, they found it caused a massive surge in sightings. But some areas were more affected than others. The team's global map shows them that hundreds of sightings in the Pacific Northwest took place long before Patterson's film, making them potentially far more reliable than sightings reported elsewhere in the years after. A key hotspot is the area around the town of Chilliwack in British Columbia. There were a cluster of sightings here in the early 1930s and 40s. One of the best documented encounters took place in July 1934 in a remote forest on the edge of the Chehalis Indian Reserve. Millie Saw and a friend are at home. Tonight they will encounter a creature they thought was only a local legend. The two women report a giant hairy hand at their window.
Giant hairy hand. Fuck no.
And being trapped for the whole night by a monstrous creature. It's an untarnished record from impeccable witnesses. And they're not alone. As we move forward in time on the global map, the reports from around Chilliwack just keep coming, in increasing numbers. September 1941. This is Jenny Chapman and her young children. They're a respectable folk, known and trusted in the local community. It's a typical afternoon. The kids are playing, and Jenny is hanging her laundry. Her husband, Jack, is at work on the railroad. they're alone. Their home is miles from the nearest town. The forest is close and dense. And something is out there.
Come here, come behind me.
Jenny knows it's not a bear.
Come here, stay behind me.
And it certainly isn't human. She only knows it is a creature she has never seen before. Jenny Chapman and her children flee for their lives. Jack Chapman arrives home at dusk.
Sarah! Jenny!
Oh!
He finds strange reddish-brown hair snagged on the high door lintel. The house has been ransacked. A 300-pound fish barrel has been lifted, broken apart, and the fish stolen.
When you run like hell, you don't stay there, you just get the fuck out.
Realizing his wife and children are missing, he runs into the forest. Jack Chapman eventually finds his family taking refuge in the nearby town. The family never returns to the homestead.
Fuck no, I wouldn't either.
If the creature exists, the team agrees the Pacific Northwest might be one of the few places in the world with enough wilderness and resources to support a large omnivorous ape the size of Bigfoot. But there are some crucial questions they need to answer.
One of the things you need to work out is actually what they eat, particularly what they might eat during the winter when, you know, food is presumably not very good supply. And the sort of the equivalent animal that you might think of would be something like a bear, which of course can hibernate. But the larger primates, really, it's not something that they can do. So you need a food supply.
Yeah, right. And in the Pacific Northwest, I mean, one thing to bear in mind that the coastal forests of British Columbia, for example, has very little snow accumulation during the winter. And so there are thousands of miles of coastline through that inside passage up into southeastern Alaska that actually is a very rich habitat and provides a lot of food resources throughout the year.
Yeah, things like shellfish and
sure, shellfish and kelp and all the invertebrates that are available in the tide pools.
The ransacking of the Chapman's house suggests Sasquatch has an appetite for fish. If so, it wouldn't be the only primate to eat seafood. Several species of monkeys eat mollusks they find in shallow water. But Sasquatch are frequently seen far inland at much higher altitudes. Surviving here would require Sasquatch to live on hard-to-process foodstuffs, like sedge grass, leaves, even bark. This in turn would require a specially adapted gut.
A very long gut with a long passage time allows them to process coarser food items, leaves and so forth, that would be unavailable to many other animals that inhabit the western United States. It's not out of the realm of possibility whatsoever.
But do sightings of Sasquatch in the Pacific Northwest match up with the best food zones for a large omnivorous ape? Using the global map, the team compares sightings with the best possible habitats. They match up almost perfectly.
Well, there's a lot of links between altitude.
How did a giant ape get to North America? Seeking answers, they look to Asia and sightings of another famous unknown creature, the Yeti. Searching for evidence of Bigfoot, a team of scientists has been exploring the Pacific Northwest. They found an ideal habitat for an omnivorous great ape. Now they investigate reports of similar creatures in Asia, searching for links between them and an answer to how Bigfoot got to North America. Their first Asian location, the mighty Himalayas, the highest mountain range in the world. It's home to what local peoples know and fear as the Yeti. From our global map, our experts can see a tight cluster of sightings at altitudes over 9,000 feet above sea level, with an annual snow and rainfall of 40 inches. The most important evidence for Yeti is footprints. In 1951, climber Eric Shipton was at a height of 20,000 feet during an expedition to Mount Everest, when totally unexpectedly, he came across these ape-like giant prints. With no other humans living even remotely nearby, he was convinced they must have been genuine. Jeff Meldrum has a cast of the original Shipton footprint, and he's convinced it definitely came from a real creature.
It's quite distinctive in that the large toe is divergent from the remaining toes. A more thumb-like appendage. The Shipton footprint is further enigmatic in the fact that the second toe is quite enlarged. This may be a natural feature, or it could also be a pathology. We don't really know, since only a single footprint was documented.
It seems extremely unlikely that someone would add an injury to a faked footprint. And even more improbable that they would fake footprints on a remote snowfield more than 20,000 feet up in the Himalayas. The trouble is, this seems an unlikely habitat for a giant ape.
Primates are basically tropical animals. The sort of temperate, very cold areas that you see Yeti in are really very different from what you'd expect to see with a modern primate.
But there are exceptions. These Japanese macaques live at an altitude of over 10,000 feet, and further north than any known primate. They've adapted to survive in temperatures of -4 degrees Fahrenheit. Could Yeti have adapted to live in the same environment?
There are other primates that are adapted for high altitudes, and they have very huge home ranges.
I don't think Yetis live in the snowfields. I think they pass through the snowfields, and they spend most of the time foraging in the forest where the food is. And on my one visit to Nepal, I was impressed by the number of food plants.
That's a booty, that's what that is.
Was the same as mountain gorilla food plants.
Yeti's available diet and its footprints suggest it could be a creature closely related to a giant mountain gorilla. But locals say they have seen it tearing yaks and goats apart with claws. This seems impossible because apes don't have claws. Ian Redmond's experience on expedition suggests there may be a simple explanation.
I found the carcass of a wild goat, which had been eaten by a predator, and there were big cat prints nearby. But I would think that any intelligent hominid coming across a carcass killed by another predator would immediately avail himself of it.
Rather than kill yaks and goats itself, Yeti could be a scavenger. The team has little other evidence to go on. Tibetan and Nepalese monks treasure Yeti hairs and bones as sacred artifacts. Some samples have been analyzed for DNA, but so far, almost all have been identified as belonging to other known animals. But the Yeti isn't the only unknown giant creature in this isolated part of the world. Less than 300 miles from Mount Everest, in the mountainous jungles of the Garo Hills of northern India, there is a long history of sightings of an almost identical creature, called locally the Mande Barum.
Local people encounter them all the time. They see them in the forest. They say in general they're quite gentle, that they don't really harm you, but they're still extremely afraid of them.
Descriptions of the Mande Barum and the Yeti show such close similarities. Team member Ian Redmond thinks they are the same species, just adapted to different environments.
I think of it as the lowland Yeti. It's not up in the snowfields, it's down in hot, steamy tropical forests of northern India.
Evidence for this lowland Yeti is even more difficult to track down.
It's actually very good luck to get a piece of it. And so by the time anybody goes to investigate it, villagers have come from miles around and ripped off a token. And it's almost like a relic, a little piece of a saint. You never see a whole body, but you occasionally see the scalp or you see a finger bone. And in fact, local ranger he had a finger bone, and he wanted to have it submitted for DNA analysis to see what it was. And he gave it to the Department of Wildlife, and they thought it would bring mockery to the department, and so it disappeared.
Keep her alive.
What this does, though, is highlight fear of ridicule, because anyone who's seen any of these things is likely to keep quiet about it because they'll be mocked.
1,000 miles east, in China, is what may be a third variety of Yeti. A creature the Chinese call the Yeren.
The Yeren.
In the mountainous forests of central China is a cluster of 200 sightings. But these are just reports from the last few decades. Legends of encounters with the Yeren, or wild man, date back to 200 BC. Yeren, Yeti, and Mande Barum, three almost identical Bigfoot-type creatures, all sighted within a few hundred miles of each other. The theory is they could all be linked and share the same ancestor, a giant ape that lived in Asia in the past. Remarkably, discovered only a few hundred miles south of these three clusters of sightings, is fossil evidence of a giant prehistoric ape. Called Gigantopithecus, for centuries its teeth were used as ingredients in Chinese medicine.
Gigantopithecus was first discovered by these molars that were being sold in Chinese apothecaries as dragon's teeth, and turned out to be big ape molars, and then a bit of mandible was found, I understand, and if you kind of put that together, it seems that it was a large gorilla-like ape.
It was using bone samples like this that team member Jack Rink, a specialist in fossil dating, worked out how long ago Gigantopithecus lived.
Well, to the best of our knowledge, Gigantopithecus's last known occurrence was about 300,000 years ago in southwest China. So that's your geographical and your temporal location for the last sighting in the fossil record.
This means Gigantopithecus was still alive at the time of our Stone Age ancestors.
There's almost no possibility that humans and Gigantopithecus did not encounter each other. So I really firmly believe that there has to have been interaction between these two primates.
The majority of the team believe that if the Yeti and Asia's other reported giant apes exist, they are almost certainly descendants of Gigantopithecus. But is the North American Sasquatch? Today, Asia and North America are separated by the Pacific Ocean. But many times over the last 1,000,000 years, a temporary land bridge has formed between Siberia and Alaska as sea levels have changed. It's possible a giant ape could have migrated across this precarious plateau of land into North America. But there's another creature that could also have made this journey. Now the team investigates evidence that sightings of Sasquatch might not be a giant ape, but a species much closer to man.
What? Nigga, what? Ah!
One summer afternoon in 2007, Robert Wilson was driving in a heavily forested area on Vancouver Island. He didn't know it, but the area had a long history of Bigfoot sightings. Suddenly, he caught sight of something totally unexpected.
At a place called Maureen Creek, I'd just gone over the bridge when I saw through the trees what I thought was a bear. Slowed down and saw what I can only describe as a large, hairy man who looked caveman-like, if you wish, or sort of a Neanderthal features. As big as a bear, you know, easily. But it wasn't a bear, it had human features. I just couldn't believe what I was seeing, but I could see very, very clearly.
Wilson's incredible sighting points to the possibility that Sasquatch may not be a giant ape at all, but could be some kind of prehistoric human. Our expert's global map reveals hundreds of sightings of giant Neanderthal-like humans all across Asia. The greatest concentration of these is in the Caucasus Mountains, south of Russia. These sightings became so numerous that over time, the creatures were given a name. They are called Almas, or Almasti, meaning wild people. One of the most compelling and reliable of all the reports about the Almas was documented in 1925. General Mikhail Stepanovich Topilsky of the Russian Red Army attempted to surprise what he'd been informed were rebel soldiers hiding in a remote cave. The Russians could hear something moving inside. To their horror, the general and his men discovered they had gunned down not a modern enemy, but some sort of prehistoric human.
The dead creature lay with his eyes open and his teeth bared. In general, the hair was very thick, without any underfur. The knees were completely bare of hair, and there were callous growths on them. The color of the face was dark. The nose was flat, with a deeply sunken bridge.
Well, the eyewitness descriptions of the Almas, a heavily muscled body with a thick torso, deep-set eyes and heavy brows and very prominent cheekbones and thick jaws, could easily represent the Neanderthal.
But Neanderthals were only one of what we are now discovering to be a whole range of different types of early human.
One of the really interesting things about human evolution that we're now finding is that it's not a kind of evolutionary tree. It's more what we call an evolutionary bush. And there are lots of little side branches. There are lots of cousins of humanity that didn't go anywhere.
Evidence for other primitive human-type creatures has been increasing dramatically. In fact, fossil evidence of a human relative has been found on the island of Flores in Southeast Asia. And it shows that this creature was alive until recently. Unlike the Almasti, they are very small. But they too are a separate species from modern man. Scientists named the creature Homo floresiensis.
Homo floresiensis, the hobbit, is always described as an example of island dwarfism. So this is an animal that's found itself on an island with none of the normal competitors that we'd normally have. And there is no need for it to be big anymore. Nothing's going to eat it because there are no predators. And so the particular ecology it's in is favoring being small.
Fossils of this real-life hobbit date to 10,000 years ago. But locals on nearby Sumatra have long spoken of a legendary small forest man they call Orang Pendek. Could this be the same creature? Or perhaps an even more primitive subspecies? Anna Nakaris has worked extensively in Southeast Asia, where she has discovered new species of primates. She's convinced local people's stories of orang pendek are reliable and of a real creature.
Local people can be extremely reliable, and there is a lot to say in listening to the stories of the people that live in these remote places.
The thing that's so fascinating to me is the life that's been breathed into the legend, so to speak, by the recent discovery of the Homo floresiensis, the hobbit. You know, the prospect of a relic population of hominid or another type of primate might not be so far-fetched.
Incredibly, just as these local stories have proved orang pendek might have a basis in fact, so too, new evidence reveals what might be the remains of the real-life Almasty. In March 2010, an amazing new discovery was made on the borders of Russia and Kazakhstan, in the same region as the 1925 encounter. From just a single finger bone, scientists identified yet another type of human species. They're calling it the X-woman, or Homo denisova.
So we've got this X-woman that's just been identified just from a finger bone that we've extracted DNA from. And the DNA in this finger bone is sufficiently different from the DNA that we've extracted from other modern humans and from Neanderthals that we think it was probably from a completely different species. So in fact, having multiple species of humanity is probably the norm.
Scientists now think Homo denisova was a cousin of Homo floresiensis. Some of the team believe remnants of multiple species of humans could still be living today.
These days, we seem not to be able to imagine that we can be living side by side with another bipedal creature, whereas in fact we did for 1 million years. And that was only discovered for certain in the 1980s.
Exactly. Why would the present be the exception to the rule that has seemed to prevail for literally millions of years?
An astonishing new discovery in China may supply the team with another possible candidate in their search to explain Bigfoot. A giant ancestor of Neanderthal called Homo heidelbergensis. Until recently, heidelbergensis was believed to have gone extinct more than 250,000 years ago. But according to Jeff Meldrum, these newly unearthed remains may completely rewrite these dates.
It's remarkable because the preliminary dates have been placed at about 12,000 years ago, which is extremely recent.
This find suggests heidelbergensis was still alive in Asia when the first modern humans were migrating to North America. Like them, it could have crossed the land bridge that once connected Siberia and Alaska. Next, the team examined if the North American Sasquatch could really be a type of primitive human. In their quest to find definitive evidence of Bigfoot, a team of scientists is examining the possibility that the creature may be a type of early human. They've been investigating a potential suspect called Homo heidelbergensis, a giant ancestor of Neanderthals, which could have crossed into North America from Asia.
Woo! Totally one that cousin me.
The earliest written records of an encounter with Bigfoot. Could it be the same creature?